Welcome, friends. You have summoned me to show you around these walls which have seen many changes, which I, the spirit of Chillington Manor, have watched for centuries. The history of my manor stretches back over 700 years. Today the buildings contain wonderful objects and are called Maidstone Museum. I do enjoy having the museum people here, but it was not always thus. Together we will unravel the story of these walls. Come, let us take a tour of Chillington Manor through the 17th and 18th centuries, and we will uncover fantastic feasts, battles, and cider. In our last journey, I showed you how Peter Mapleston built this new brick house with its 2 wings, replacing a drafty medieval hall. I enjoyed the company of the Mapleston family for more than 30 years, and I was sorry to see them leave my manor. I welcomed a new family into the house in 1562, the Barhams. Nicholas Barham was a lawyer, MP for Maidstone and Sergeant-at-Arms, an important and wealthy man who paid £500 for these magnificent buildings. I heard rumour of him putting a man to the rack to extract evidence for a trial, which was not uncommon in those days. But he was a kindly family man. I looked over his shoulder whilst his will was drawn up and saw how well he provided for them and for his retired servants. I cannot say I found his son and heir Arthur a similarly attractive proposition. His inability to manage the estate's affairs and love of the good life meant I observed him getting ever deeper into debt, even selling his musical instruments and pawning the fine tapestries. The wall paintings he commissioned up there on the 3rd floor of the manor house must have cost him dearly. Very few people ever see them. Let's have a quick peep. I know where to find fantastic feasts. Here is a glorious picnic with minstrels under canopies. The next owner of Chillington was a Puritan called Henry Hall. He was another lawyer and bought the estate in 1609. I was surprised that he didn't have these painted over. Nearly 40 years later, I witnessed the Battle of Maidstone. The battle was fierce. Royalists chased General Fairfax, leading Cromwell's men through the town, and then finally defeated them right on the doorstep of the house. Here is Colonel-in-Chief Brockman, who often grumbles to me about being on the losing side. Hundreds of royalists hid in St. Faith's Chapel, which once stood next door. All that remains of the chapel now are these columns. I was saddened when in 1665 the estate's land was sold off by Henry Hall's son George, who did not live here and rented out to tenants. But in 1698, one of those tenants bought the manor house, and then I came to know the Southgate family well. This was a family whose trade was the making of cider. They were not from the classes who had previously owned the manor. But I cannot be too harsh, as they built this rather lovely house to the side of the Tudor manor house. Today the museum people, I do like having them here, use the ground floor for their local history displays. This floor contains the Kent Archaeological Society. And the top floor is far too messy to show you, as it's the staff offices. Come. Unfortunately, bankruptcy cut short the Southgate's occupation. Perchance cider was not as quaffable as it is today. Another lawman, the attorney Mr. Fuller, lived here for some 30 years after the Southgate's departure. But when the last of his family died, my manor's slow decline began, and in 1786 the house lay empty for a year. I was saddened to be alone for the first time in more than 500 years. 'Twas not its finest hour. But my solitude was soon broken. In truth, I began to wish for a return of peace, as the house was divided up and rented out to tenants by a succession of owners. At times there were 6 different families here, all living in different parts of the house. And then the Charles family bought Chillington at the start of the 19th century, and respectability returned. They occupied this half of the house, and the other half was let to gentlemen. William Charles's main profession was as a doctor. and he built his surgery into the front of the manor house. However, his noble calling was rather overshadowed by the blanket cleaning and felting factory that he also ran here. Steam and fluff and noise. But at least it was contained within the old medieval house at the end of the long gallery. It was William Charles's son, Thomas, whom I have to thank for those lovely museum people being here today. Have I mentioned them before? Thomas, an eccentric a man as ever lived, collected anything he thought interesting, whether fossils, paintings, or Greek pots. How his housekeeper moaned about the dusting. But those collections were the start of the museum. Come with me on my next tour to find out which curator was poisoned by their wallpaper and why the tower built to watch the stars was only used for a few years. Until then,